the person who started Human Longevity Institute says it's 100+ club. So they say that everybody should live to be at least 100. And here's the key phrase, and not die of anything stupid.
Today we kind of have a fun topic, and with all the latest and greatest in longevity and wellness, and there's so many different trends. What's the right thing to do? We know about therapeutics. This one isn't really a discussion on which modalities to use. But one thing that we can all in the scientific community agree on is that early detection saves lives. And early detection of all these things can tell you and kind of mold pathways, give you certain regimens that will show you exactly what should and should be done. So, for those of you who are, you've got 3 gym memberships, you have a food sourcing program, you head over to red light therapy, you do all these different things. Well, also you need to make sure that we're evaluating where you are now so you can look to see if any of these things are actually beneficial.
Absolutely. So think about this, and this is down the same road as exactly what I'm going to say now. For the female listeners, you get mammograms, right? Mammograms are there to detect or not breast cancer, so you can make sure you catch it early so you can treat it. I've had a colonoscopy. We get colonoscopies. Again, this is what we're going to talk about, is something that Dr. Layke and I have actually done ourselves at a certain company. We get no money from them when we're talking about this, so we're going to actually talk about the experience we had at a place called Human Longevity Institute. However, there are plenty of other longevity centers around the country and around the world that do very similar things. But we feel like this was such an incredible experience for us that we think we should talk to everyone about it, because a lot of people, my own friends, your friends, we sit down at dinner and have this conversation with people, and people are like, oh, I didn't know this existed. What if we were going to tell you that there is a way to make sure that you can live as long as possible? Now, the person who started Human Longevity Institute says it's 100+ club. So they say that everybody should live to be at least 100. And here's the key phrase, and not die of anything stupid. Now, what does that mean? Now, when I say not die of anything stupid, is something that's preventable, that if we caught early in your 30s, 40s, 50s, that we could easily treat, and it would not lead to you dying, and it would let you live longer. So we're going to kind of talk to you about our experience at HLI, or Human Longevity Institute. Again, however, there are a lot of other centers that have similar types of diagnostics. This may be one of the first ones in our area, and that's why we met with the people who started it, all very, very, very legitimate members of the scientific community, people that are leaders in their community, and they literally have taken money out of their own pockets to build this type of service for you. So without further ado, I think you and I should talk about our experience and what we did and how long it took, and if it was beneficial or not, or if it was a big waste of time.
Yeah, listen, I think that many people undergo what's called an executive physical. And so the first question is, when should you do this? I don't know that there's any hard, fast rule. I think that after the age of 45, this should definitely be a part of, our annual check. And the reason for that, listen, and some of these can be a little costly. I totally understand that. But the idea is, if you can afford it, the idea is to start earlier, because, in your 30s, gosh, if you could look back, let's say by your 40s and 50s, there are 4 different things that occurred to you. Your body's breaking down. Maybe you have some plaque in your heart, something like that. Now, could you imagine if you could have told your 30-year-old self, oh, by the way, if you undergo this particular testing, you can prevent this from happening? I don't know if you could put a number on that. I mean, the idea is, when you undergo these types of evaluations, this is a head-to-toe comprehensive evaluation that is more than just, what our insurance pays for. I mean, frankly, I think that at a certain point in a recommendation, you need certain blood work, after, once you get even older, then we get EKGs and x-rays and things like that. But it's usually when we are symptomatic. By that time, it is too late. So prior to HLI, I remember undergoing an executive physical by my primary care physician, Dr. David Eng. And I'll never forget, we took, probably 5 vials of blood. He did a carotid ultrasound. We did an echocardiogram. We did pulmonary function tests. And then he sent me for a coronary calcium scan, x-ray, all kinds of things.
And interestingly enough, most people would say that's overkill. I mean, that's the funny part.
Sure.
So interestingly enough, for a healthy young man like Dr. Layke at his age, most doctors would say all of those tests are unnecessary. Keep going.
Essentially what you're looking for, again, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but the whole idea behind this premise is that we are searching for the hidden killers, things that brew over years that if you're aware of, let's say it's as simple as removing one thing from your diet, or it's adding another 20 minutes of exercise 3 days a week. Simple things like that to save your life. If you knew it, if something flagged and said, oh, by the way, all you have to do is this one thing and it's going to get better, you would do it. The problem is you're not aware of it.
And the interesting part of what he's saying is that exact thing happened to me. And that's why I wanted to talk about this on this podcast. So, when you're healthy, just like Dr. Layke's talking about, you feel good. Why go to the doctor? I mean, listen, I'm older now. I'm over 50, so it's a little different. But when you're in your 30s or 40s and you're in good shape and you're working out, and you feel good and you look good, why go to the doctor? Oh, you know why? Because there's stuff that you can't see. There's stuff that you don't know what's going on. There's genetic predisposition to certain things. So let's just talk about this and how we did it. Basically, Dr. Layke, myself, our wives, we drove down to La Jolla because there was only one center back then. And we got there in the morning. I think we started at let's say 8 in the morning. And for the next 6 hours or so, we went from room to room or station to station in a very upscale, luxurious, and very well done kind of setting. And we had the following done.
Just prior to getting there, I just wanted to, you notice how he said that within 5 or 6 hours, you had everything head to toe, inside and out. When I discussed previously undergoing that executive physical, all those tests were written for me, but they were performed over a week just because you had to schedule each test separately.
In multiple different places.
And so this is all in the same center. So imagine you show up, you have blood drawn, and they took 13 vials.
And you say, why 13 vials? Because not only are they taking what you normally take, which is your normal blood count and your electrolyte panels, but stuff that you don't routinely take. Certain things like iron levels for a man normally don't get taken. Certain things like all of your different vitamin levels, all of your different hormone levels, and then a big thorough genetic panel, which I've never had done. So all these things were also very, very interesting because imagine if you're having a baby and you go with the wife and you haven't had a baby yet, and you see that you have a predetermined genetic predisposition to a certain type of disease you both carry, you may want to have genetic counseling. These are things that routinely we don't even think about. So you have all that blood taken. Then from there, and the order is different for everybody, but you have an MRI from head to toe. Now, why do we need an MRI from head to toe?
The interesting part is that this is top of the line, a 3 Tesla MRI. So you can essentially detect a tumor at 3 millimeters or greater. Now, if we were to find a 3 millimeter tumor anywhere on the body, we can usually treat it. There are very few or rare circumstances where it's not a treatable disease. But when you find something that early stage, it becomes much easier to treat.
And most of the time cured. And that's the key. They're Sloan Kettering, Memorial Sloan Kettering is probably one of the biggest cancer centers in the world. now has the same type of screening protocols for people that have anybody in their family they've lost to pancreatic cancer, because they believe that if they can detect a pancreatic lesion that's small enough, they can cure it. Mm-hmm. And they're actually showing that they can. By taking those small lesions out, they're showing they're not coming back. The problem with a lot of these diseases that we have is we catch them too late. And that's the whole point of talking about what we're talking about.
They're usually symptomatic. And so, again, by the time that a problem is symptomatic, it's usually too late, or it becomes much more laborious to treat. So in any case, we went from room to room. So we had an MRI from head to toe.
And that MRI, it just doesn't show soft tissue tumors, but it shows the blood vessels in your brain. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you don't have small aneurysms that, you could just pop and that's it. Sure. Things like that are so preventable that it just blows your mind. Everything you can possibly imagine that can get looked at and screened. Remember, this is called screening.
Yep.
So we're screening for something and seeing if you have that. So if you do, you can catch it and prevent earlier disease or problem.
Yeah, imagine a cardiac MRI that will show you every blood vessel, every portion of the heart, including all the valves, just to make sure that there's no issues. And then from there, depending on your age and risk factors, you undergo what's called a coronary calcium scan, a CT. So it's a CAT scan that looks at your vessels and makes sure that there's no buildup of calcium, and it gives you a particular score. If you're in the 0 range, you're great. But if you're not, something needs to be changed. We go to a DEXA scan, which shows our bone density. We look at the liver fat. We look at body composition. When you go from test to test to test, it's thoroughly comprehensive. And you can kind of the way that HLI set it up was at the very end. You would essentially set up multiple meetings with one of their house physicians. And they would go over not only your blood work, then they would have another one to go over your genetic testing. Then they would go over a follow-up that makes sure that what you're doing is being effective. Now, in addition, for those who are not ready for a colonoscopy, they have a test called the Cologuard. So we send a stool sample, and it will tell you with a great accuracy in the 95 percentile whether or not there's something that needs to be addressed. Then we send you home. If you are anywhere near prediabetes, they will send you home with a prescription for the Freestyle, which is a continuous blood glucose monitoring device that will show you. And the interesting part is I was borderline, and what they did is said, hey, listen, take this anyway. It will allow you to look at some of the foods that cause sugar spikes. And it was so interesting to me because I could eat so many other things, including foods that had sugars in them. But the moment I ate rice or pasta, it shot through the roof. And so that's something that ultimately is stressing your pancreas to create insulin. And so these are things that you may want to lessen. I'm not saying you have to completely cut out, but you may want to reduce the intake of some of these things.
And interesting how someone like Dr. Layke, who you look at, you say the last person that's ever going to have diabetes or have increased glucose is going to be him. But if he wouldn't have gotten it tested, he wouldn't have had an idea of what's causing the sugar spikes. It's unbelievable what we have at our fingertips nowadays that can really help with our longevity and our health. The only thing is how we use it and how we actually take that information and put it to use. Now, a lot of people need to find out what's causing the issue to actually fix it.
Definitely.
The problem is most people don't.
Yeah, and you have to look at your family history as well. Remember, they created you. And so the idea is my mother is a diabetic. All of her brothers were diabetic. My grandmother was a diabetic. And so someone in my family, one out of the 3 kids, is going to be a diabetic. I mean, it's just those are the odds. And so to keep a close eye on that is obviously a good thing to do.
So we had all these tests done. Seamless, very nice setting, served a very nice lunch. Looking back on it, it was very easy and quick, kind of seamless day of testing. You would think it'd be exhausting because you had all this blood taken, then you were sitting in an MRI and then a CT scan. And then after we left, we went home and they said that someone's going to call us and go over stuff with us. And it was great, honestly, I have to say. So when I walked out of there, one of the radiologists looked at me and said, hey, I'm looking at your MRI and your liver's lighting up. I don't know what it is, but let's take a look at the labs. Let's take a look at the genomics, the DNA, all of the stuff with your gene, and then take it from there. And that's what I really kind of thought, wow, these guys are amazing. They're not just taking one modality. They're taking everything together and using the whole, every study that we've done, they've taken them together and seeing what the problem really is. So then we came back, and about a week or two later, we had a conversation with an MD that was assigned to us. So then we had our own doctor, and if there was something wrong, then they would refer us to somewhere even different, like UCLA or Mass General, somewhere that they would actually take care of the problem. So for me, we went over everything, and most of my stuff come out really fine, but they said that my liver had a lot of iron in it. Then they looked at my iron levels, and they were through the roof. And they looked at me and they said, well, let's see what's going on. We have to wait for your genetics to come back. And guess what, guys? The genetics all kind of came back, and it showed that I had something called hereditary hemochromatosis. Now, I've never known this. I'm a doctor. I've had all sorts of tests in my lifetime. Never knew that there was anything wrong with me, but I've never had iron tests done. So I got very worried. Interestingly enough, if I wouldn't have gone to HLI, I could have gone into liver failure in the next 10 to 15 years and maybe even needed a liver transplant. Mm-hmm. Instead, I was told that the treatment was to donate blood 4 times a year. I mean, it was awesome. It was a win-win in every direction. Yeah. There's a shortage of blood. I'd go give blood, and luckily nothing else came out that there was wrong with me. Everything else is okay. But there was a big thing that they found. There was a simple blood test. Mm-hmm. They matched it up with my genetics, and you also saw what you have possible predispositions to genetically. And you can somehow alter your lifestyle to try to make better and to try to improve it and not to get to that level. Again, luckily what was found for me was great. And I donate blood, and I've checked my labs, and everything's okay. And it really... It was an amazing experience for me because they found something. Now, here's the thing. If they don't find something, you walk out of there and they say, yeah, I'm great. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that it's a one and done. Yep. And that's the key, guys. There's a reason we do mammograms. There's a reason we do colonoscopies. There's a reason we keep doing these things, because our bodies constantly change. We have a variety of different internal and external factors that affect our cells and can cause other issues. So this is something we should do every couple of years, if not every year, every 3 years. And there are going to be longevity centers that are going to pop up left and right. And I will promise you in the next 20 to 30 years, healthcare companies are going to implement this, because the cost of prevention is going to far I don't want to say exceed, but it's going to be significantly more important than treatment. And the cost of treatment is going to be very expensive. It's a lot of death. There's a lot of unfortunately morbidity that goes along with it. So this is something that Dr. Layke and I have been talking about to try to make it so it's given to the masses. It should be done for everyone. This should be regular healthcare. For now, it's not. And unfortunately, the one we went to carried a little bit of a higher price tag, so it might not be for everyone. But I do think over time, the prices are going to come down because the more people that do them, again, the lower the prices can be. There are other things that can be done. For example, there is a test called GRAIL. It's a kind of a genetic predisposition to cancer test. I think it does, I don't know how many different types of cancers, but it's just a blood test you can take, and it gets sent out, and it tells you if you have a predisposition or if you have a higher risk for certain types of cancers. Mm-hmm. It's great to know these things because you can treat them. We're in this incredible age of medicine that we know much more than we ever have. And that's why brilliant minds like David Sinclair are talking about you should live to be over 100. Everyone should live to be over 100. But number one, you got to take care of yourself. Number two, you have to make sure that if there's something else that you're missing,
you're aware of it.
Absolutely. Because if not, then you're back to being at step one. It's like not going to get a colonoscopy. It's like not going to get your mammogram. You're crazy if you don't do those things.
Yep, definitely.
You agree? I mean,
yeah, I think Dr. Danielpour is right. You're going to see a bunch of things pop up. There's Pronuva, where you can get MRI from head to toe. It's a little more affordable. The one great thing about Human Longevity is that they have access to every top physician in the country. And so, if you underwent this testing and you found you had a stomach cancer, then you would go to the lead guy in the country for gastric cancer. Same thing with lung cancer. Same thing with diabetes. They're going to talk about, managing this the best way possible. And so I think, one part of it is the diagnostics. The rest is follow through. And I think it's going to be really beneficial.
And it's interesting. I say this because a couple of years ago, when you talked about this kind of stuff, people thought you were crazy. Longevity centers and living as long as possible. Go on your computer, I just did, and Google longevity center. Every major university is going to have one. There are private institutions that are coming up with them. It's because it's the reality of it is we are going to live very long, and we want to live as healthy and as good of a life as we possibly can. It doesn't matter if you live to 90 and you have 10 different cancers that are cut out of your body.
Yeah.
Seriously, you want to live long, and you want to live quality. And that's the key. I mean, look at this. It is nonstop. You look at it from UCLA to USC to Stanford, and they're all longevity centers. And most of them are going to be based around detection, diagnosis. Find out if there's something wrong so you can treat it. A lot of people are scared for that, but don't be, because I do think it's important. Interestingly enough, we took our wives, and I still laugh at it because I look at my wife and I say, you're 30. At the time, she was 30 years old. I'm like, you're 30 years old. What can be wrong with you? But no. If there was something wrong, wow, imagine catching it super early. So
yeah, and it's also setting a baseline. I mean, the idea is you have something to compare it to. Whereas, sometimes physicians look at your current state, and it's okay, but if you compare it to what it was and there's a big shift, now we got to start looking the trend, and that's how you can catch early disease. So I wholeheartedly believe that this is going to be the wave of the future. I do recommend early detection. For those of you who are interested, Human Longevity, you can go to their website, which is humanlongevity.com, and they can give you more information there. Again, I think it's just something that we went through. I highly recommend.
Yeah, and and if you have any questions about it, you can always ask. You can call our office or ask, because it is something that I am firmly a believer. I think it's excellent. They caught something on me. They've shown things on our colleagues. And be honest with you, a really good friend of ours went there and they found a small little lung nodule, and he's cured. They actually took a little piece of his lung out and it's done. And if they wouldn't have found it, chances are it would have gone undetected and might have spread and possibly even caused significant problems, maybe even death for this young man. And we're happy that was caught. Definitely. So if it wasn't something that I saw firsthand that it worked, I wouldn't even want to talk about it. But I got to tell you guys, it is a luxury item. It's a little more expensive than we'd want it to be for the masses. But I promise you, over time, that price is going to continually come down. And Dr. Layke said, if for some reason, Human Longevity is too expensive, there is a place called Pronuvo. Pronuvo is awesome. They do an MRI scan head to toe at a very reduced cost. And then you can do your own genetic testing with Grail. There are different ways to do it. Bring it up to your doctor. Hopefully educate them. Maybe they can send you for it. But I do think it's something that we should all be doing. And hopefully the healthcare system is going to end up rolling this type of program out for everyone, so everyone can be screened at a younger age.